Hi, welcome to iEducator. This is Teacher Jeff. I'm a university teacher and an engineer by profession. Today, we will discuss what operations research is and its brief history. So, what is meant by operations research? It is a discipline of applying appropriate analytical methods which will help managers in solving problems and making better decisions. In simple terms, operations research is concerned with helping not only managers but also executives make better decisions. Today's managers are working in a highly competitive and dynamic environment. In the present environment, managers have to deal with complex systems and complicated dependence of the criterion of effective performance. And so, conventional methods of decision-making process is found to be inadequate. However, common sense will tell us that experience and commitment of the manager are essential in making decision. Aside from that, operations research has been defined as a scientific approach to management problems with respect to product mix, inventory fluctuations, and shipment of goods to various warehouses, usually under conditions requiring the allocation of limited resources. If we say limited resources, it means that there is a scarcity of resources. Scarcity of resources is a problem that always confronts the production of wealth, goods, and services. While the availability of resources is limited, the human wants are insatiable. That being the case, economics comes in then to harmonize human wants with what he has. Operations research goes by a lot of names. So it can be said as a decision science, it can be called as management science, or it can be synonymous with systems analysis, system science, or quantitative approach. On the other hand, the history of operations research. Now, operations research is a war baby. This is considered as a war baby because the first problem which was attempted to be solved in a systematic way was concerned with how to set the time fuse bomb to be dropped from an aircraft onto the submarine. In fact, the main origin of operations research was during the Second World War. The military management in England invited a team of scientists to study the strategic and tactical problems related to air and land defense of the country. The problem attained importance because at that time, the resources available with England was very limited, and the objective was to win the war with available meager resources. The resources such as food, medicine, ammunition, manpower, etc., were required to manage war and for the use of the population of the country. Therefore, the generals of military invited a team of experts in various walks of life, such as scientists, doctors, mathematicians, businessmen, engineers, professors, etc., and the problem of resource utilization is given to them to discuss and come up with a feasible solution. These specialists had a brainstorming session and came out with a method of solving the problem, which they coined the name as linear programming. As the name indicates, operations is used to refer to the problems of military, and the word research is used for inventing new method. I think that's a good place to stop. If you like this video, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button for the latest updates. Thank you. The next key area that I'm going to be discussing right now, that would be decision making and some aspects of decision. Many a time we speak of the word decision as if we know much about it. But what is meant by decision? What it consists of? What are its characteristics? Now, let us have a brief discussion about the word decision, as much of our time are expended in dealing with decision-making process, especially in operations research. Now, if we say decision, it is the conclusion of a process designated to weigh the relative uses or utilities of a set of alternatives on hand so that decision maker selects the best alternative which is best to his problem or situation and implement it. In simple terms, it refers to a conclusion or resolution reached after consideration, while decision making involves all activities and thinking that are necessary to identify the most optimal or preferred choice among the available alternatives. And in short, decision making is the process of choosing what to do in order to achieve an objective. Now, there are a couple decision-making processes used by leading companies and taught by best-in-class universities, but they all, in one way or another, mention the 7 steps we will go over right now. Now, the first step in decision making, that would be describe the problem. Here, we ask the question, what is the specific problem you must solve, or challenge you must overcome, or opportunity you wish to take advantage of? Being able to describe your objective succinctly is a sign you truly understand it. Now, let us have some example to better understand the first step in decision-making process, which is describing the problem. Now, like I said earlier, if we say describing the problem, you make sure the description is specific, meaning to say it's direct to the point. It should be easy to understand and succinct as well. For example, remember the last time you had a problem to resolve with your boss. Did you resolve the problem more like this? I never know what to work on. My boss sends me stuff to do at random times, and I'm not sure what's most important. When he walks over to my desk, I'm afraid he'll interrupt what I'm doing to have me work on something totally different. Or did you resolve the problem more like this? I need to be able to prioritize what I'm working on at any given time. Okay, that's one example for describing the problem. As you can notice, the second description is more specific and clear compared to the first description. The second description makes me feel more confident about solving the right problem if I go through the rest of the process. Okay, that's step number 1 in decision-making process, describing the problem. Now, right after you have described your problem, the second step you need to do is to create potential solution. Now, what is meant by creating potential solution? I'll be giving you another example in order for us to better understand this. If we say creating a set of potential solutions, what we usually do is to brainstorm, okay, to brainstorm potential solutions based on the problem that we have described. As an expert, we should also make use of our intuition. As our example, the valedictorian of my high school class got into Stanford University, but she turned it down. Just talking to career experts, Stanford University would have been the obvious choice because according to College News US rankings, it ranks on the top 10 nationally. But she didn't just refer to expert lists and class counselors. She also talked to her family and to her pastor too. Now, from these conversations, she slowly realized how important it was for her to be close to family and church. Now, for example, for many people, choosing which college to go to is one of the most important decisions in life. And it sets the trajectory for your entire career and can even influence what type of person you marry and how you're able to raise your family as well. Now, for step number two, creating a set of potential solutions for those decisions you've made before, you might have strong intuition about the best response. In many cases, going with your gut can save time and energy. But for those hairy decisions in uncharted territory, can you come up with some creative ways to achieve your objective? Now, your first idea is rarely the best option. Now, asking for people for help is a common way to generate potential solutions or responses. But whom to ask? Now, based on the given problem or example, the class valedictorian asked the help of the expert, and she believed they be a SME or subject matter expert, or they can be a trusted confidant who are an expert on her. And also, she asked her parents because her parents are pretty much experts of everything because they will come up with ideas that are well suited to her. So basically, she was able to create a set of potential solutions or responses regarding to her problem. Now, the next step in decision-making process, we call that one as collecting of data. Now, what do we usually do in data collection and what are the data gathering techniques as well? Now, let me give you another example based on the third step in decision-making process. Now, if we collect data, we actually gather information about the potential solutions through surveys, interviews, observations, etc. For example, a couple of years ago, I was helping a technology startup boost their customer growth. First, I wanted to understand how many people were visiting the site. Of those visiting, how many were signing up for the service? Of those signing up, how many were staying on? And for those who left, how long did they stay on? Now, we should understand the customer acquisition funnel. Now, this quantitative data told me what the problem was. Lots of people were actually leaving the service after a very short time. It was great to know where to focus our attention, but we still didn't know how to fix the problem. That we needed to collect qualitative data so we could understand why people were leaving. Now, we actually implemented a survey asking people why they were leaving the service. We noticed a trend. Most people were leaving because the service was too slow. Now, for the next 6 months, we focused on speeding up the service and scrapped plans to add additional offerings. And as a result, fewer people left and we boosted customer growth by 27%. Now, based on the sample problem presented, it is very apparent that the consultant or expert of that technology startup company employed both quantitative and qualitative methods of collecting data. Some of the most useful and easiest ways that were implemented were surveys, interviews, and observations. And so for that matter, that is how we collect data, and that is the third step in decision making. Now, the fourth step in decision making is evaluation of each option. What do we mean by this? Now, first, use the data that you collected, and after you analyze it for each option, then check in with your intuition. For example, after we got married, My wife and I planned our honeymoon. For 3 weeks, we could go anywhere in the world. We soon were caught in a paradox of choice. We listed 10 different regions of the world to visit, everywhere from Southeast Asia to Scandinavia. Now, to help us choose, we created a rubric with the following factors. So the following factors that we have chosen or selected, that would be weather, the distance from home, romantic quality, outdoor activities, and food as well. Now, we scored each factor out of 10 points. So each destination could get a maximum score of 50. Now, Southeast Asia got 45 points, and South Africa got 42 points. Now, remember, in evaluating each option, we need to check in as well with our intuition. Now, having this data, while these scores were pretty close, you have 45 and 42 points respectively. Now, our intuition had been telling us Southeast Asia the entire time. Now, we choose that destination confident that our intuition and the data were aligned. Now, after collecting data, we can use it to measure the pros and cons for each of the potential solutions or responses. Once we measure the pros and cons, we can rank our options. Now, it can be different to rank options when the basis of ranking is not obvious, right? Sometimes it can feel you're ranking apples and oranges. Now, in these situations, a rubric is really effective. Simply choose a few important factors for your decision and give each option a score for each factor. Then add up the scores and rank based on score. Check in with your intuition too. Though our intuition translates the learnings of our entire life into emotions and physical gut feelings to aid our decision making. And if the rubric and your intuition are pointing to the same solution, then that's worth paying attention to. Okay, so that is evaluation of each option. Now, moving on to the fifth step in decision-making process, that would be choose a solution or response. What do we mean by this? If the choice is not obvious, we need to see how reversible your top picks are. The more reversible, the less careful you have to be in choosing. Now, for example, Zappos famously found success by offering insanely easy exchanges and returns for their shoes. If Zappos didn't offer easy and free exchanges, your purchasing decision would be permanent and you'd need to be sure of which pairs of shoes to buy. You might never buy anything because critical data to make your decision would be impossible to collect before purchasing. The reality is that your purchasing decision is reversible and low cost. So you can buy shoes at Zappos without being 100% sure of your decision. Millions of people have no trouble making purchasing decisions at Zappos every year, resulting in over 2 billion US dollars in annual sales for the company. Now, remember that choosing is an art, right? Since there is almost never a silver bullet solution that guarantees success at no cost, which is actually correct. Now, how carefully you choose should be driven by how reversible the choice is. And basically, if you can reverse your decision easily and at a little cost, then it matters less which decision you make first. You can actually try something to see if it works, then try something else later if it doesn't. Okay, so that is your step number 5 in decision making process. Choose a solution or response and see how reversible your topics are. Okay, moving on to the 6th step in decision making process, That would be taking action. Taking action means creating a plan first to save yourself from headache in the long run. And also ask which is better, waiting or moving fast. Okay, for example, in order to better understand this, so this will be the example that we will be analyzing. Now, in the world of building software, there are many ways to build the same thing. That's part of what makes software engineering fun, but it's also what makes decision making difficult. Now, a couple of years ago, my team and I were building technology to live stream classroom whiteboards to students learning mathematics on their phones at home. Now, the engineers researched ways to build this really cool software and voted for an approach that would take 3 months. It was March, and we didn't need the new software until back to school season in September. We resolved to put off deciding an approach for a couple months. Now, in April, an engineer found an alternative approach while researching a totally separate project. This alternative approach would shave 2 months off of the original timeline. And because we spent time upfront thinking about the best plan of attack, we realized waiting had an advantage. And because we waited, we saved a boatload of time to spend on another exciting project. Now, based on the example presented, we should ask ourselves, how can you most effectively execute on your decision? Now, choosing is very hard. Yes, it is. But carrying out that choice can be just as difficult. Now, in plenty of other cases, however, speed works against you. These are cases when waiting has an advantage because it gives time to gather more information or for the situation to change for the better. And lastly, the final step in decision-making process, that would be evaluating the impact. Now, if we say evaluating the impact, we should not skip. Instead, we use a metric to measure whether your decision had the intended impact. Now, in order for us to better comprehend this one, let us have some example. Okay, for example, I've shared documents on Google Drive a million times, yet last week, one of my investment partners didn't receive something I shared with him. I shared the document again. Sharing usually works, so I figured it was just a fluke and there wasn't any need to double check. The next day, I find out he still didn't get the document. It's a contract he needs to sign, and with every day that passes, there's a chance someone else scoops up the investment opportunity. Finally, I take a closer look at how I'm sharing, and I notice that there's a typo error in the email address I'm using. I share it again, but this time I tell him to check right away, and he sees it in his inbox, signs it, and we close the deal the same day. Now, it's very easy to overlook this critical step and move on to the next problem. But don't let that happen to you. Instead, we should plan ahead and think how we'll evaluate whether the problem was solved. So, just in case you will be sending in an important document to someone, might be to your client or to your investment partner, make sure as well that you are using the correct email address to avoid any problems in the future, okay? So these are the 7 steps in decision making process. Okay, just a brief recap. The first step in decision making process, that would be describing the problem. Second is create a set of potential solutions. Third is to collect data. Fourth, evaluate each option. Fifth, choose a solution or response. Sixth, taking action, and lastly, you evaluate the impact. All right, so the next key area that I'm going to be highlighting right now, that would be the objectives of operations research. So what is then the objective of operations research? The objective of operations research is to provide scientific basis to the decision maker for solving the problems involving the interaction of various components of an organization by employing a team of scientists from various disciplines, all working together for finding a solution which is in the best interest of the organization as a whole. Now, the best solution thus obtained is known as optimal solution. In order to make it more understandable, the objective of operations research is to solve problem to arrive at an optimal decision or solution. Okay, make sure the ones or the things that we need to remember always, that would be problem solving to make better solution to arrive at an optimal solution. Okay, that's the objective of operations research. And next key area that we're gonna be discussing today, that would be the characteristics of operations research. So what are the characteristics of operations research? First characteristic, operations research is an interdisciplinary team approach, meaning to say it involves a team of experts from different disciplines. You can have scientists, engineers, mathematicians, you can have educators, and so on and so forth. They should be working together to attain a common goal. Okay, that's the first characteristic. OR is an interdisciplinary team of approach working together in order to attain a common goal. Second characteristic, OR increases the creative ability of the decision maker. Why? It increases our creative ability because remember that in operations research, we are always solving problems in order for us to make better decisions to arrive at an optimal solution. And it's quite difficult solving problems because you need to have a critical thinking. And because critical thinking skills is imperative, so that makes it OR increases our creative ability. And the last characteristic of operations research, that would be a systems approach. It's considered as a systems approach because it's a scientific study, meaning to say we follow a certain step-by-step procedure. Okay, there is no shortcut at all. There should be step-by-step procedure for you to be able to solve a problem and make better solution. All right. So next, finally, we will be discussing the scope of operations research. And if we scope, we mean to say the coverage of operations research. Where can it be applied? Okay, so right now we will be diving in about the scope of operations research. One scope of operations research, obviously, that will be applied in defense operation. Remember that the history of operations research was during World War II. Another in industry. Why in industry? Because remember that managers in the industry make decision, and when they make decision, they will make use of operations research tools in order to arrive at a certain optimal solution. Also, it can be applied in planning for economic growth, in agriculture, in traffic control, and in hospitals. Again, I would like to reiterate, these are just some of the many examples or applications of operations research. Again, these are the scope of operations research. And finally, the last key area that I'm going to be highlighting, That would be the phases or steps in solving operations research problems. So again, like I said earlier, the third characteristic of operations research is a systems approach because there is no shortcut in operations research. There should always be a step-by-step process or procedure that we need to follow. Okay, what's the first step or phase in solving operations research problem? First is formulation of the problem. Second, identify the variables and constraints. Third, establish the relationship between the variables and constraints by constructing the model. Fourth, identify possible alternative solutions. Fifth, give an optimality test to basic feasible solutions. Next, select the optimal solutions, install, test, and establish the solution or model. And lastly, establish controls, implement, and then maintain the solution. Now, for this matter, I would not be discussing this one further because I have prepared another video for this. And for the phases or steps in solving operations research problems, were discussed further in chapter 2. All right, I think that's a good place to stop. If you have questions, please let me know in the comment section. And if you like this video, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button for the latest updates. Thank you.